And now to our interview segment. My guest, Mr. Jiti Ogunye, has some very strong opinions about the ministerial screening. We spoke about that and other issues. Let's begin with the issue of the ministerial screening. Now, the Senate leader, Senator Ali Ndume, has come out to say that because the Senate only sits for 3 working days instead of the conventional 5 working days, that the provision of the Constitution that says that they must attend to ministerial screening within 21 days means that the Senate can conduct this ministerial screening for as long as 7 weeks. What do you make of this interpretation?
The 21 days given by the Constitution is 21 calendar days. And it has something to do with legislative days, 3 or 4 days in a week, and then they can extend it the way they like. No, that's not the intent of the framer of the Constitution. When you have the oddity or the unusual situation in which ministers are not appointed immediately upon inauguration of a new government or inauguration of the National Assembly, and you have this screening taking place almost 4 months after inauguration, of course, that absurdity can be extended further by a senior leader who would then say that the 21 days given by the Constitution is legislative days and not 21 calendar days. That's not the intent of the Constitution. As a matter of fact, what we've been told now is that Thursday of this past week, the Rotimi Amechi, whose screening had been delayed, eventually had been screened. But that screening is coming outside the 21 days. And so technically it can be said that that screening is unconstitutional because it's being screened outside the 21 days. And the provision of the Constitution is to the effect that if any of the minister nominee is not screened within those 21 days, then it's deemed to have been confirmed, and then the president can go ahead to swear him into office. That's what the Constitution says. I think that when we do not do that which we ought to do, we then start extending the provisions of the Constitution to suit our own whims and caprices and our legislative indolence. That's not what the provisions of the Constitution are meant to serve. They are deliberately made to be enforced and to be followed. And don't forget that these actors took the oath of office and the oath of allegiance, and they stated that they will enforce the provisions of the Constitution. So if they are not enforcing the provision of the Constitution and they are dancing around it, I think that they are better off, apologizing rather than justifying by sophistry or legal platitudes what they are doing. When you ask a governor who wants to be a minister, pointedly, questions bordering on integrity, and that governor is now using diversionary argumentation to dodge answering that question. He said, did you do this with this? He said, I don't sign a check. Is that the answer? Whether you sign a check, whether you are a quantity surveyor, because he said that yes, the only training he has is that he's a lawyer. That means, as a lawyer, you know a little bit about almost everything. If you're a lawyer, you should know. You deal with experts. Lawyers talk about expert opinion, that people that they bring to court to come and testify and all that. And so you be a governor, you be a chief of staff, you're familiar with quotation and all that. So if a quotation is unreasonable, you will know the ordinary common man standard. You ask a question, you're dodging it. And so people are clapping that they're speaking for 1 hour. It is not the length of delivery or speech that matters, but the content.
But what do you make of the engagement between the senators and the ministerial nominees so far? Would you say that it has been robust and qualitative?
Who is doing the screening? Senate. And Senate that we're all familiar with. A Senate that has not even dealt with the issue of salaries and all that, and emolument and all that, and all that, and all that. So, that's why I talk about a political class. And so when you're dealing with the Nigerian political class that is as bankrupt as this, and I'm using my words advisedly, your expectation ought not to be too high. It ought not to be too high, because I was, raising this issue, with at a forum, and I was saying, look, if you have this kind of political class that cannot even agree on certain things, how do you then begin to deal with the situation? For example, contrary to popular but erroneous opinion that we must have 36 ministers. And nobody has said anything about that. But I know that it is not so. Section 147 provides in subsection 1 that the president shall establish the ministries that are necessary for governance. That's the first. And later down, the provision 2, 3, you then start talking about provided that the minister shall come. So if the president establishes 15 ministries, all he will say that, I'm sorry, the constitution gives me the power to establish ministries, to govern, and I've established 15. The United States has 15 secretaries. For a country with 3 time zones, for a country where a state, California, is almost as big, if not bigger than Nigeria, and it's running. And so every day these people pay lip service to having a slimmer government, a more efficient government, a government that will not be bogus. When I see the provision of the constitution that aid them to achieve that objective, and they sidestep it, so meaning that if he says, I must have 15, you can't grudge him. He's exercised his power. The other provision becomes impossible to implement because he's not having 36 ministry. For you to see the validity of the point of view I'm making, people have been clamoring for creation of states. So if we create 10 or 20 more states, and we have 56 states in Nigeria now, so we have 56 ministers, can we think? The proviso amplifies the provision of section 14.3 of the Constitution that talks about federal character, inclusion. So what is our federal character? The idea is that under section 14.3, you shouldn't have a concentration of an ethnic group, in government. It's not even only at the federal level or from certain communities and all that, at the expense of others. So you must be able to manage your diversity and have an inclusive government. And I tell you, if before the atomization of these states, we were 3 regions, 12 states, now 36. People are running their own affairs. And then you decide to alternate, as indeed it happens in a state. 3 senatorial districts. So when election is coming, you hear that, in Ogun State, no, it's from Ogun East, it's from Ogun Center. No, you have to go, that kind of thing. So if a president should say, I only have 15 ministries. So Lagos and Ogun, Lagos will have to pick one this time around. Next time, maybe 4 years after, Ogun will pick one. The heavens will not collapse. Go and challenge that provision in the Constitution. Go and challenge what that president has done. The court will say, sorry. Section 1 says, he is to determine the number of ministries that he will need to govern. Because if you follow the other one, and then that means is hamstrung. He's not able to exercise that constitutional power that he has as the executive president to determine the number of ministries that will be necessary to govern. I'm talking about a creative and reasonable and rational interpretation of the provision of the Constitution. The Constitution is not meant to enslave us or kill us or make it impossible for us to govern ourselves very well. Nigeria is said to have about 250 ethnic groups. So even within the state, that is an artificial creation, you can have about 3 or 4 ethnic groups there. So if you put this issue of federal character too far, it still defeats the purpose of those provisions. So if you have 250 ethnic groups and every ethnic group must be represented, not this artificial state. So what happens? So you have 250 ministers? Is that what you are going to have? The states are saying, even with the money they've taken from the CBN, they can't pay salaries. It's not sustainable because you have replication across the board. You have executive replicated, you have bureaucracy replicated, you have commissioner replicated, everything, including you have pilot vehicles replicated. So in a way, this geographical space is overgoverned, and then you can't see the dividend of governance. The screening is being wrapped up now, but believe you me, there is nothing fundamentally different.
Now, I want us to round up with the judgment of the Akwa Ibom State Election Petition Tribunal. The judgment nullified elections in 18 out of 31 local government areas. And this is generating some kind of controversy because some people say that the judgment is unclear, as it's not categorical on whether Governor Udom Emmanuel should leave office, and did not say anything about the rerun exercise and when it should be conducted. What do you make of this judgment, which obviously leaves some gaps?
It ought to generate concern because an election petition determination ought to be able to completely resolve an election dispute between two parties. But, you know, since the appellate process is there, appellate remedy might just cure those defects. That may just be the salvation, because ordinarily, under section 179, subsection 2, paragraph B, for an election, for a governor to be elected in an election where there are 2 or more candidates, that candidate must score the highest number of votes and must have at least 1/4 of the votes in no less than 2/3 of the local government area in that state. So if in Akwa Ibom State you have 31 local government, to be elected, you must have 1/4 of the votes in at least 2/3 of the state. And so, having nullified election completely in 18 of the local government, 31 local government. So the remaining local government cannot sustain the mandate given to the governor by INEC. So the resultant effect of that, the consequence of that, is that that tribunal ought to have nullified the election on that basis, and then say that a new governor should abide the rerun of the election, you know. But it's not done so. But as I've said, those defects, those gaps, those lapses, you know, can be cured by appellate remedy.
That's the program for this week. Don't forget that you can find these and past episodes on our YouTube channel. Let's also interact via email, Facebook, or Twitter. I'm Shola Sheyeli. Thank you for watching.